3:14 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the witching hour of American politics. If you were standing on Massachusetts Avenue right now, outside the Naval Observatory, you wouldn't hear a thing. No sirens, no motorcades, just the dead, heavy silence of a city that thinks it's asleep. But inside the vice president's residence, history isn't just being made, it's being violently rewritten. A black government sedan idles at the gate. A courier walks out. He isn't carrying a weapon, but what he has in his hand carries more firepower than a carrier strike group. 2 sealed manila envelopes. Inside, a single sheet of paper that does something the founding fathers whispered about in dark corners but prayed we'd never actually have to see. It's the kill switch. And it's just been flipped. You need to understand the psychological weight of what just happened inside that house. We aren't talking about a policy disagreement. We aren't talking about a rough phone call with a foreign leader. We are talking about the cabinet, the president's own hand-picked loyalists, the people who owe their careers, their titles, and their parking spots to the man in the Oval Office gathering in the dead of night to commit political patricide. To invoke Section 4 of the 25th Amendment is to cross the Rubicon. Once you sign that paper, there is no going back. You are telling the world that the commander-in-chief is no longer mentally fit to command. Think about the room, the vice president staring at the document, the attorney general probably sweating through his suit, the secretary of defense checking his watch. They know exactly what this looks like to half the country. To the president's base, this isn't a constitutional safeguard, it's a palace coup. It's the deep state finally taking the mask off. And let's be honest with ourselves. Let's cut through the CNN sanitization of this moment. This wasn't an act of pure altruistic patriotism. This was fear. Primal bureaucratic fear. Sources tell us the catalyst was an order given yesterday afternoon, a direct command from the president to deploy active duty military to seize voting machines in a swing state. That is the red line. That is the moment the cabinet realized, if we follow this order, we go to prison. If we refuse it, we get fired, and he finds a sycophant who will follow it. So they pulled the emergency brake. They looked at the man who elevated them and decided that for the republic to survive, or perhaps just to save their own skins, he had to be neutralized. Not by an election, not by impeachment, which takes months, but by a mechanism that works instantaneously. The brilliance and the horror of Section 4 is its speed. It is a guillotine. The courier is now in the car. He is driving down Massachusetts Avenue, heading toward Capitol Hill. The drive takes about 12 minutes at this hour. For these 12 minutes, the United States still technically has one president. The man in the White House is still the most powerful human being on the planet. But the moment those envelopes touch the hands of the Speaker of the House and the President pro tempore of the Senate, that power evaporates. It vanishes. It's a magic trick. 1 minute you're Caesar, the next minute you're just a tenant in government housing, refusing to pay rent. But here's the problem that no textbook prepared us for. The courier knows he's delivering the end of a presidency. The cabinet knows it. The vice president knows it. But does the president know it? And more importantly, does he agree? Because if the man in the White House decides that he is not done, if he decides that those signatures are nothing more than ink on paper, then that 12-minute car ride isn't just a delivery. It's the fuse burning down on a civil war. The car is pulling up to the Capitol. The clock is ticking, and the split-screen nightmare is about to begin. And snap. Just like that. At the exact moment those envelopes were stamped, received by the Speaker's clerk, the United States entered a state of quantum superposition. We have 2 presidents. This is the nightmare scenario that political scientists scream about in faculty lounges but never think they'll actually see. Legally, under the cold, hard text of the Constitution, the vice president is now the acting president. He has the authority. He is the one who should be signing the bills, ordering the troops, and sitting at the resolute desk. But physically, the elected president is still sitting in that chair. He is still surrounded by the trappings of power, and he is not checking out. We are witnessing the most dangerous gap in American governance, the gap between authority and power. Authority is a piece of paper. Power is men with guns doing what you say. Right now, the vice president has the paper, but the president has the building. Reports are flooding in from the West Wing, and they paint a picture of absolute bedlam We're hearing about mid-level staffers, people in their 20 seconds who just answer phones, literally hiding in bathrooms because they don't know whose orders to follow. Do you answer the phone if the acting president calls? If you do, are you committing treason against the guy sitting in the Oval Office? If you don't, are you insubordinate to the new commander-in-chief? There is no HR manual for dual presidencies. The chief of staff is reportedly running a counterinsurgency operation from the West Wing basement. He's telling anyone who will listen that the cabinet's letter is fake, illegal, a palace coup. He's ordering the Secret Service to lock down the complex. Meanwhile, across the street at the Eisenhower Executive Office Building, EEOB, the vice president is trying to set up a government in exile. He's in a conference room, no Oval Office, no grandeur, just a guy in a suit with a laptop and a copy of the Constitution, trying to convince the Pentagon that he's actually the boss. And this is where it gets really dark. The president has barricaded himself in the residence. He isn't speaking to his cabinet. He's speaking directly to the mob. His latest tweet sent just moments ago, "The traitors have revealed themselves. They want to steal your country. I am still your president. Do not let them in." He is weaponizing his own base against the institutions of government. He is betting that his personal connection to 70 million voters is stronger than a piece of parchment written in 1967. And looking at the crowds gathering outside the gates right now, screaming for justice, he might be right. So we have a standoff. A president with a megaphone and a fortress on one side, an acting president with a legal document and a conference table on the other. It's a stalemate, a grotesque constitutional staring contest. But there is one thing that cannot wait, one thing that doesn't care about legal arguments or political posturing, one thing that demands a single, solitary finger on the button. Somewhere in the Pentagon, a general is looking at a screen, and he's realizing that the nuclear chain of command has just fractured. The world's biggest arsenal is effectively ownerless. And that is where this story moves from a political crisis to an existential terror. You've seen it in movies, you've seen it on the news, the black leather briefcase carried by a military aide who stays within a few feet of the president at all times. They call it the football. Inside that bag isn't a big red button, it's a menu of options for ending civilization. And to order from that menu, you need a plastic card the size of a credit card, nicknamed the Biscuit. It contains the authentication codes, the gold codes that prove you are the commander-in-chief. Right now, inside the White House, the president has his biscuit. Across town, the vice president has his biscuit. And for the first time in the atomic age, nobody knows which one works. Let's get technical for a second, because the devil is in the details. And right now, the details are terrifying. Under normal protocols, the vice president's codes are dormant. They are backups, inert pieces of plastic until the National Military Command Center at the Pentagon flips a digital switch to activate them. Usually, that happens when a president dies or goes under anesthesia. It's a checklist, routine. But tonight, the NMCC is the most stressful room on Earth. Imagine being the brigadier general on duty in the tank right now. You just received a fax from the Speaker of the House saying Section 4 is invoked. The Constitution says the vice president is now the boss. So technically, you should flip the switch. You should kill the president's codes and activate the VPs. But then your secure phone rings. It's the president, the man who promoted you, the man whose picture is on the wall behind you. And he is screaming that this is an illegal coup and ordering you to maintain his command status. What do? If you flip the switch and you're wrong, you've just participated in a mutiny. You've locked the elected president out of the nuclear arsenal. If you don't flip the switch and you're wrong, you are letting a man who has been legally deemed incapacitated keep his finger on the trigger of 4,000 nuclear warheads. And pity the poor military aide standing next to the president right now. That young major is carrying the football bag. Does he walk away? Does he physically take the bag from the president? If the president demands the bag and the aide refuses, the Secret Service might draw their weapons. If the aide hands it over, he might be court-martialed for obeying an unlawful order. This is the nuclear paradox. Deterrence, the whole reason we haven't blown ourselves up since 1945, relies on certainty. It relies on Moscow and Beijing knowing exactly who is in charge. Right now, they are looking at Washington and seeing a two-headed monster fighting with itself. They see vulnerability. And in geopolitics, vulnerability is an invitation. The nuclear codes are an abstract horror. They are numbers on a screen. But down on the ground at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the conflict is about to get very physical, very fast. We have talked about the generals, we have talked about the politicians, but we haven't talked about the Praetorian Guard, the Secret Service, the men and women with the earpieces and the sunglasses. They are sworn to take a bullet for the president. But which one? The agency is fracturing, the brotherhood is breaking, and the guns are coming out. The United States Secret Service was founded in 1865 to suppress counterfeit currency. Today, their job is much simpler and infinitely more dangerous. Protect the body of the president, not the office. The body, agents on the Presidential Protective Detail train together, eat together, and bleed together. They form a bond with their protectee that transcends politics. It is a blood oath. And right now, that oath is dragging them into a civil war within their own agency. Inside the White House, the PPD agents have made their choice. They are locking the doors. They are denying access to anyone not approved by the president. To them, the man in the residence is the principal. Period. Outside the fence, the vice president's detail is operating under new orders. Their protectee is now legally the commander-in-chief. By law, they should have access to the White House. By law, they should be taking charge. We are seeing reports of a literal standoff at the Southwest Gate. Agents with the same badge, the same training, and the same flag on their lapels are screaming at each other over radio channels. One side demanding entry, the other side threatening to engage. This is the Praetorian Guard problem. When the law becomes ambiguous, loyalty becomes personal, and it spreads outward like a contagion. Look at the streets of DC right now. The Metropolitan Police Department, MPD, is overwhelmed. The crowds summoned by the president are surging against the barricades. They aren't just protesters, they are believers. They believe they are saving the country from a coup. Normally, this is when you call in the National Guard, but here is the cruelest irony of American law. The President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the DC National Guard. There is no governor in DC to intervene. So the vice president, sitting in his conference room, issues an order. General, deploy the guard to clear the streets and secure the Capitol. 5 minutes later, the president, sitting in the residence, issues a counter order. General, deploy the guard to protect the White House perimeter and stop the usurpers. The commanding general of the DC Guard is now the most lonely man in America. Which order is lawful? If he obeys the VP, he is deploying troops against the man who appointed him. If he obeys the president, he might be helping a mentally incapacitated leader use the military as a personal militia. This is how democracies die. Not with a bang, but with a confused lieutenant not knowing which side of the street to stand on. The chain of command relies on a single, unbreakable link at the top. That link is gone. We are moments away from kinetic activity. That's the polite military term for Americans, shooting Americans. If one firecracker goes off, if one car backfires, the tension in that crowd will snap. The police are scared, the agents are confused, the mob is angry, it is a powder keg sitting on a bonfire. But let's assume, just for a second, that we survive the night without bloodshed. Let's assume the generals freeze, the police hold the line, and the sun rises tomorrow on a stalemate. The crisis isn't over. In fact, the torture is just beginning. Because the Constitution has a clock, a very specific ticking clock. We are about to enter a 3-week period of legal purgatory that makes tonight look like a dress rehearsal. The president is drafting his response. And when he sends it, the real game of chicken begins. You might think the signature on that midnight letter was the end of the story. It wasn't. It was the opening move in a game of constitutional Russian roulette. Here is the mechanism that nobody talks about because it's too complicated for a soundbite. The president has a reverse Uno card. At any moment, right now, in 5 minutes, or tomorrow morning, the president can send his own letter to Congress stating, "I am perfectly fine, I am capable, give me my job back." And here is the terrifying part. The moment that letter lands, the burden of proof flips. The power wants to return to the elected leader. Unless the vice president and the cabinet scream, "Objection!" within 4 days, the president wins by default. Let's say they do object. Let's say the vice president and the cabinet double down. They send a second letter saying, "No, he is dangerous. He cannot serve." Now the timer starts. The fate of the free world gets dumped into the lap of 535 members of Congress. They have 48 hours to assemble. They have 21 days to vote. 21 days. 3 weeks. Imagine the next 3 weeks in America. We are talking about a zombie government, a vice president trying to steer the ship while the captain is locked in the brig screaming mutiny. Every stock market will crash. Every foreign adversary, China, Russia, Iran, will test our borders because they know we are paralyzed. And then comes the vote. To permanently remove the president, to make the 25th Amendment stick, Congress needs a 2/3 vote, not a simple majority, 2/3. In both the House and the Senate, do the math. In this partisan climate, in this divided America, you couldn't get 2/3 of Congress to agree on the lunch menu, let alone agreeing to overthrow a president from their own party. The framers of the 25th Amendment made a fatal mistake. They designed a system based on honor. They assumed that if a president was truly incapacitated, everyone would act in good faith. They assumed a president would have the dignity to step down if his own cabinet turned on him. They never built a system for a president who has no shame. They never built a system for a president who would burn the house down just to rule over the ashes. We are looking at a system that is failing its stress test. The guardrails are bending. The bolts are popping. So, what happens tomorrow? Maybe the military restores order. Maybe the courts intervene. Or maybe, just maybe, the American experiment ends not with an invasion, but with a typo in a legal document that nobody knows how to interpret. This isn't just history. This is a warning. The institutions we trust, the Constitution, the Supreme Court, the Joint Chiefs, they are just people. And people break. If you want to understand the future of this country, don't look at the laws, look at the men willing to ignore them. We will be live streaming the congressional session the moment the gavel drops. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. You need to be here when the vote happens. Because the next 21 days aren't just about who sits in the Oval Office. They are about whether we still have a country left to govern. Stay safe, stay alert, and God help us all.